Pode me dar, vou te exigir o meu lugar. Sabe que é meu, não é só seu. Se não me der, eu vou tomar. Câmera na mão, take 1, tomada 3. Porque é que a miséria dá ibope pra vocês. Minha história é o seu roteiro, a favela é o cenário. Enquadra o moleque vendendo no você porque é um simples otário. Tá aí, não sei, e faz o foco onde quiser. A bilheteria é sua, não abuse da minha fé. Glamorize a minha vida, maquiando a realidade. Em cartaz, a mentira nos cinemas da cidade.
So Brazil is at a political crisis and an economic crisis. But behind both of those things is a moral crossroads.
It's the deep-seated fault lines and disconnect of a country with profound inequality.
Invented this term, Belíndia, for Brazil, which is a mixture of Belgium and India, and this was back in 1974,
Para eles, nós somos excluídos do país, da sociedade. Porque se eles ouvissem o quê? Todos os moradores, não, mas eles escutam quem tem mais condição financeira dentro da favela. Então são muito poucos que têm condições financeiras dentro da favela, dentro da comunidade.
Both rich and poor risk losing ground in the economic turmoil.
So-called vulnerable middle class in Brazil is really at risk, and there could be a lot of regression, and in fact some of it is already happening. You already see a big drop, of about 4 million people that have dropped out of the Class C into, the lower ranks of the income distribution.
Meanwhile, the upper middle class and rich cling to economic advantages, and they don't need a radical government messing that up.
Here we take a look at some of the severe inequality in Brazil, and in Sao Paulo in particular, a city famous for its traffic. So what do the people with the most money do? Forget the traffic, they just take the helicopter.
Luckily, a new generation of Brazilians is working to bridge the gap. I visited Raul Santiago, a journalist trying to change perceptions about his hometown, the Complexo do Alemão favela.
Durante muito tempo, o Complexo do Alemão ele foi retratado na mídia comum de uma forma que só falava da violência e muitas vezes olhando de fora da favela e sem entrar na favela, sempre falando de longe, observando a nossa realidade de longe, sem o envolvimento e muitas vezes multiplicando coisas que não eram reais. Então hoje, com o coletivo Papo Reto e com aparelhos como esse, um celular, a gente se tornou nós mesmos multimídias. Então a gente faz a nossa comunicação, mostra a nossa realidade, não ignorando os problemas e as situações violentas, mas também mostrando as coisas positivas que tem dentro da favela.
So, what's his message?
¿Qué piensa que necesita esa comunidad más que nada en adelante para mejorar la situación y la conexión al país y a la ciudad y al estado y al mundo?
Então, a gente precisa mais do que polícia, né? Porque a gente vive uma contenção da camada pobre a partir do braço armado do Estado, que é a polícia. Pensar iniciativas na educação, na saúde, e principalmente valorizar a juventude do Complexo do Alemão.
Raul, muchas gracias por su tiempo.
Eu que agradeço.
Of course, issues of exclusion extend beyond the favela. I spoke with Alessandra Orofino, executive director of Mio Fio, which works on community organization.
I do not buy the idea that if you're privileged in some way in this society, all you want is to perpetuate that privilege. I think most people want everyone to have access to a good education, to opportunities, because that means that more people will be actively building a country that is better for everyone. What we need to do is, after those moments come, keep that energy going through a well-organized infrastructure that supports us and helps us know each other, meet each other, find each other, talk to each other, make decisions together.
So if Brazil's at a crossroads, which direction should it take?
Brazil invests less than 3% in infrastructure. That's not even enough to maintain its existing stock.
3 decades of low investment in infrastructure have led to a situation in which there is waste simply because of lack of investments in infrastructure.
The fact is that we could have had more investment, and certainly infrastructure would have been the way to go post 2008, 2009. Not necessarily consumption, as we know today, is not growing.
But it's not just more. It's also what? Here in Salvador, we see a 21st century football stadium in the shadow of favelas.
Porque saneamento básico quase não tem. Você vê aqui, bonitinho. Se você for lá para trás, tem barranco caindo. Aqui tem água jorrando, água de esgoto. Isso aqui é só a fachada.
Education is another key area of focus for the future. White Brazilians average over 8 years of education, while darker-skinned young people average about 6. Mariluce Maria Sousa runs an art program for at-risk youth. She talked about some of the challenges these young people face.
Quando a gente pinta, a gente não fica ali passando pincel, fazendo desenho, acabou, acabou. Não, a gente pinta conversando, sabendo o que a criança está fazendo em casa, o que ela está passando, qual é a dificuldade dela na escola. O meu filho dá reforço escolar para eles, revisa o caderno deles toda semana, vê quem está frequentando a aula.
It's a problem that extends to universities.
So I'm reliving my student days here at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. It's a fantastic school, and like all public universities, it's free and highly selective, which means it functions as a subsidy for richer students that went to fancy private high schools.
A new quota system has improved diversification, but that's a short-term response. To truly address the problem, Brazil needs to get to the root. Until then, the country remains at a social crossroads that bleeds into a political crossroads, and a political crossroads that leads to gridlock in the face of an economic crisis.
So the big question moving forward, does Brazil have a prayer?
Of course it does. That's the beauty of Brazil. It survived booms and busts and inflation, impeachment, military rule, and somehow it always emerges. Somehow it continues as the country of the future. But to get to that future, it must first get through the crossroads.